From VOA Learning English, this is the Help Report. Midwives help women have natural childbirths at home and in medical centers. A group of midwives in Los Angeles, California, is trying to train more minority women. They also want more women to give birth at home. Only 1% of babies in the United States are born at home. However, interest in home deliveries is on the rise. In Los Angeles, for example, some women are choosing to use midwives instead of the usual hospital birth with a doctor. Midwives are specially educated in childbirth services. They begin as apprentices or students. Then they must pass state tests called medical boards. In 2012, Jasmine Lavender delivered her second child in a bathtub. She chose birth with a midwife because she did not want to repeat the hospital experience she had with her first child. Doctors delivered that baby by operating on Ms. Lavender. The surgery is called a cesarean section. Ms. Lavender says the operation was unneeded and hurried. She says she felt she was not given enough time to deliver her baby vaginally. Ms. Lavender's second baby arrived without a C-section at the Community Birth Center in South Los Angeles. Licensed midwife Racha Lawler established the center. Ms. Lawler says it offers general health services such as testing for sexually transmitted diseases or STDs. When the center first opened, there were about 300 licensed midwives in California. Most of them were white. But Racha Lawler wants to increase by 100% the number of midwives of color. She hopes to do this through community outreach and free help for students. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The economies of India and China could be larger than many people have thought. A new study for the World Bank now has some experts predicting that China will become the world's largest economy by one measure this year. The same study says that India's economy could pass Japan's as the world's third largest. To get their results, the researchers used a different way to measure the size of a nation's economy. Usually, economists measure by a country's gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services it produces. But some say a different method called purchasing power parity, or PPP, is a better measure. It examines differences in the cost of living among nations. The report is from the International Comparison Program, which was established by the United Nations. The results are based on prices in 2011. Kamel Melahi is a professor at the University of Warwick in Britain. He says PPP provides economists with a way to compare the costs of ordinary things that people need in different countries. Experts then establish a base exchange rate and use it to compare economies. The gross domestic product measure uses market-based exchange rates to compare economies. They are exchange rates paid by travelers and exporters. So the main difference between GDP and PPP is how exchange rates are computed. Greg McBride is Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. He says PPP is more like an estimate than a measurement. World Bank information shows that China's GDP was about $8 trillion in 2012. That was half the size of the $16 trillion U.S. economy. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Health Report. Experts are watching the outbreak of a virus in the Middle East for signs that it could spread around the world. David Swerdlow studies the spread of disease across large populations. He is leading the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention response to the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. Mr. Swerdlow says 30 to 40% of people who got MERS have died. He says infected people pass the virus, which has spread to several countries. There is no treatment or vaccine. MERS is a member of the viral family of germs that cause the common cold and severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS. That disease was first reported in China in 2003. It infected thousands of people and killed hundreds before it was contained. Amesh Adalja is with the Infectious Diseases Society of America. He says so far, MERS has not spread as easily as SARS. MERS first appeared in September of 2012. The World Health Organization reports 261 infections and 93 deaths from MERS. Most reported cases have been in Saudi Arabia. In April, there was a sharp rise in cases there. Some health experts fear that means the MERS virus has changed or mutated. But the CDC's David Swerdlow says DNA research suggests there has not been a major change. Scientists still do not know a lot about MERS. They do not even know where it came from, although they suspect camels. On May 2nd, the CDC reported the first case of MERS in the United States. Officials said the patient had been in Saudi Arabia in April. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. African educators and civil society group representatives met recently to discuss the United Nations Millennium Development Goals on education. They said a UN report on the subject shows progress, but they also said some countries cannot meet the goals by the targeted date next year. The attendees said the countries cannot increase education and guarantee equal treatment for boys and girls in schools by 2015. They noted that this is especially true in nations south of the Sahara Desert. Experts from 43 African countries gathered in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon. Jean-Pierre Adzoa of Cameroon's Ministry of Social Affairs was among them. He says the government is doing everything possible to warn parents that they will harm their children if they do not send them to school. The World Wildlife Fund for Nature is best known for environmental work, but the group is also helping efforts to increase school attendance. Hansen Injaforti is director of the WWF office in Cameroon. He said the office is now doing more on education because so many children do not go to school. Beatrice Njenga heads the Education Division at the African Union Commission. She says educators are preparing a 50-year education program for Africa. She says the educators need financial assistance and central planning. The education experts also noted some good news. They said rates of poverty have been falling and more children are attending school. They said that is especially true in the more than 30 countries where schools for the very young are opening. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Many migrant women go to work in private homes as cleaners, cooks, and caretakers. They are called domestic workers. Recently, several incidents in Asia and the Middle East have brought attention to abuse of such workers. A court in Malaysia sentenced a man and his wife to death in March for starving to death a 26-year-old domestic worker from Indonesia. Another Indonesian maid says she was beaten by her employers in Hong Kong. The 23-year-old spent almost a month in a hospital. Pictures of the injuries and reports of her 20-hour workdays led to protests across Indonesia. The International Labor Organization is a United Nations agency. It estimates 50 million migrants are employed as domestic workers. About 5 million of them are Indonesian women. They sent almost $10 billion back to their families at home. Audrey Guichon is with the group Anti-Slavery International. She says the foreign labor program in the Middle East, called the kafala system, leaves workers at risk for abuse. In Saudi Arabia, 42 Indonesians are awaiting death sentences. Half of them are believed to be domestic workers. Darsim Tawar faced a death sentence in 2011 for killing her Saudi employer. She argued that he was raping her at the time. Officials changed her sentence only after her supporters paid the family of the dead man. In April, the Indonesian government negotiated better conditions for Indonesians working in Saudi Arabia. The agreement signals the end of Indonesia's 3-year suspension of labor exports to Saudi Arabia. However, critics say Indonesia must do more. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The reported rape of a 6-year-old student at a well-known school in Jakarta has received widespread media attention in Indonesia. The costly Jakarta International School, or JSI, serves many children of diplomats and wealthy foreign families. Indonesian police have arrested several suspects in connection with the incident reported in early April. Similar reports of sexual abuse at the school have followed. This week, another kindergarten student also said he was abused at the school. The Education Ministry ordered the kindergarten closed. The ministry said the school had been operating without permission. Tim Carr heads the Jakarta International School. He described the recent incident at the school as an unimaginable tragedy. He said the school is taking all measures to prevent another. Years ago, American investigators named a former JSI teacher as one of the worst child sex offenders ever identified. American William James Vahey worked at the school from 1992 until 2002. He killed himself last month after U.S. federal investigators seized some of his computer records. The evidence included 90 photographs of boys Vahey reportedly abused. The number of reported rapes is increasing in Indonesia, but the reports do not get a lot of public attention. Last year, the Indonesian Child Protection Commission declared child rape a national emergency. But it said it does not have dependable numbers on rape. A large part of Indonesian society considers it offensive to talk about sexual abuse. Victims are often afraid to report such crimes. They fear it will dishonor their families. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The government of Senegal and the organization Sea Shepherd have launched a campaign against illegal fishing along the country's coast. The non-profit group is helping to prevent the poaching of hundreds of thousands of tons of tuna, swordfish, and sharks each year. Sea Shepherd is providing a boat with a crew trained to help catch poachers. Senegalese naval ships are also involved in the campaign. Lamia Essamlali is leading Sea Shepherd's effort to help guard the Senegalese coast. She says the group is documenting illegal ships and reporting them to the Senegalese Navy. Some fishing boat crews use nets and other equipment to hide the names of their ships. She says Sea Shepherd has informants that help target the illegal fishing boats. She says poachers are being more careful since the campaign began. They poach at night instead of during the day. Ms. Essamlali says the campaign is also educating buyers of fish in industrial countries. She says they should know that the food they eat comes from an area that depends on legal exports of fish to make money and feed people. Health experts estimate that fish provide more than 66% of the animal protein eaten in West Africa. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says fisheries and linked industries provide 25% of all employment in West Africa. European Union rules have made it easier to find out where fish are caught. Ships and governments that do not cooperate may be barred from the waters. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. May 1st marked the 50th anniversary of a special computer language. It was created to permit college students to use computers. At the time, computer owners were mainly governments, businesses, and universities. Programmers wrote commands in complex mathematical expressions to operate these early computers. John Kemeny and Thomas Kurtz were professors in the mathematics department at Dartmouth College. They wanted all students to be able to use their school's computer. So they developed a simpler set of computer commands called Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code, or BASIC. They said they made the code without many of the technical details used in other languages. Mr. Kurtz says soon almost everyone at Dartmouth College began using computers. BASIC was a major step toward the development of personal computers. Peggy Kidwell is the curator of mathematics at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. She says BASIC was created just as computers became fast enough to perform many commands at the same time. She said it helped develop the idea that just about anyone could use a computer. Mr. Kurtz and Mr. Kemeny released BASIC to the public for free. Many improved versions of BASIC followed, along with the speedy development of computers. Code writers soon created other easy-to-use computer languages. Today, few people use BASIC, but personal computers owe their existence to the first programming language that anyone could speak. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Have you ever wondered what the average American farmer looks like? A new report says he is a 58-year-old white man. That information comes from the United States Census Bureau, an agency that collects and studies information about the nation's population and economy. The report says farmers who are 65 and older are the fastest growing group of farm operators. As these farmers retire, American agriculture will experience big changes. The report suggests what some of those changes might look like. Adrienne Gibson works a small piece of land north of Knoxville, Tennessee. In some ways, she is something of a new face in American agriculture. First, she is a woman, and second, she is a minority. And she is succeeding in an industry controlled mostly by white men. But the Census Bureau report suggests that may be changing. The number of minority farmers working American soil is growing. The report also suggests that U.S. farms are getting smaller. Nate Phillips teaches farming at Middle Tennessee State University. He says smaller farms are partly a reaction to changes in the way Americans think about their food. This movement is often called farm to table. It means that more Americans are starting to buy food that is grown locally, and they want to know exactly where their food is coming from. Nate Phillips notes that more young people are farming because of this trend. There is another trend that is sure to please American farmers. The Census Bureau found that the value of the food farmers produce rose more than 25% in just 6 years. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. American officials are close to approving new rules for enabling vehicles to communicate with each other. Officials hope the new technology will reduce the number of traffic accidents. Automobile manufacturers may be required to equip all new cars with what are being called vehicle-to-vehicle communication devices within the next 3 years. Vehicle-to-vehicle, or V2V, is a communication technology. It enables vehicles to share information about their speed and movement at a rate of 10 times a second. Cars will be able to identify possible dangers within about 300 meters. The cars will then warn their drivers or even take action to avoid an accident. The drivers will be able to see, hear, or even feel warning signals. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration expects the new system to reduce the number of car accidents by as much as 80%. Critics admit that V2V technology is a major development, but they are concerned about possible conflicts with other wireless devices. They say those devices already operate in the wireless frequencies planned for V2V technology. Scott Belcher is the Chief Operating Officer of a group called Intelligent Transportation Society of America. He says people may also be concerned about their privacy. Government agencies and private industry have already invested almost $1 billion in research. U.S. officials expect the new technology will be required in American vehicles by early 2017. They believe it is the first step toward a better and safer transportation system. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.